Notre Dame fans, we are back. Irish Breakdown Nation, IB Nation, as Tommy Guns says. We are back. It is Monday, and that means it is recruiting hour time with my man, Ryan Roberts. But before we do that, I do have some exciting things that I want to announce, something that we're excited about. And that is we have added to our team at Irish Breakdown. I told you all from day one, if you invest in us and you help us grow, I will invest that into making the product and the content even better. And with that in mind, we have made two hires over the weekend. The first is Sean Stiers, and a lot of you will know who Sean Stiers is. Sean is a radio host of WSBT, does a tremendous job. He's covered Notre Dame in the past. We've hired Sean to be the Notre Dame football beat writer for Irish Breakdown. But, Ryan, it would be really stupid to hire someone like Sean and not take advantage of the fact he is such an outstanding radio personality and then transition that into our podcasting format. So with that being said, Sean is not just going to be a contributor to these afternoon podcasts. He'll be on from time to time in his beat writer capacity, but Sean is actually going to start a new podcast at Irish Breakdown. It's going to be part of the Irish Breakdown product. You'll find it right here on this YouTube channel. But it's going to be an evening show that's going to launch in June. And we're still working with the time. We got to figure out whether it's going to be 5 o'clock is best. 6 o'clock is best, but it's going to be an evening show. It's going to be Monday to Friday during the off season and during the season. And it's going to take a completely different look than just us kind of sitting down here talking ball. And he's going to have guests on. We're going to talk about, obviously, Notre Dame topics of the day. We'll talk about some college football topics. He's going to bring on writers that cover other teams during the season. So it's going to give a completely different feel. And, of course, Sean will have his analysis and opinions of things as well. But it's going to take on a completely different sort of layout, the format, the topics. It's all going to be different to what we're doing here, because what we didn't want to do, and we talked about this as a staff, is we don't want to just create a second show that's just like the one we're doing that afternoon. So we'll do some recruiting stuff and we'll continue to have our analysis and our breakdowns, but we really wanted to create a second show at night, a live show that's going to be consistent, that just takes a different approach. We've always talked about wanting to bring guests on, but it's harder to bring guests on at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're gonna work on this and really try to get it rocking and rolling, and we're excited about it. It's going to launch sometime in June. We haven't been able to hammer out a date. It just depends on a couple other things that we're working on. But Sean is part of the team. He is going to be with us, and I cannot be more excited about that. Also, we have added Devin Jackson, and I tweeted about this last night. Devin Jackson is someone Ryan has known for some time. He's going to be joining us as a recruiting analyst. He has a couple of things he's working on, but we're going to bring him in to start trying to get him rocking and rolling here with our recruiting coverage. He is going to be covering, obviously, a chunk of the southeastern part of the country, and he lives in New Orleans. So we're going to obviously try to get him rocking and rolling with that part of the country a lot. So I'm excited about Devin. Ryan recommended him to me. I'm familiar with his writing a little bit because he's done some draft stuff that I've read in the past. Just loved him during the interview process. Just really sharp, really a go-getter, wants to put in the work. So he's going to be part of that as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And there's some questions about, like the show. Brandon asked, Ryan, if you want to go ahead and pull that up. Brandon asked, will these shows accept super chat questions or just accepting super chats but not answering any questions? So we're still working on that, Brandon. It's not going to be a Q&A. Like now we have our topics and our Q&A. It's going to be more like 45 minutes to an hour. If it goes over, it goes over. If it's a little under, it goes under. The content's going to be the key. But it's not going to be like the Q&As like we do here. Now, what we're going to talk with Sean about, he's got to get to learn this forum and this format and all that kind of stuff. There will probably be opportunities to do super chats during the show, but it's not going to be sort of jumping on at the end. It'll be more of if it comes up during the show and it's applicable to the show. It's not going to necessarily be a Q&A. Now, Sean may start doing this and really want to do more of that type of stuff, and that's going to be up to him. But I want these shows to be a little bit more condensed, a little bit more topical. Pick 2 or 3 topics per show, have guests on, talk about them. We'll do spots on there as well. Like, we'll bring Ryan on if there's recruiting news to talk about. I'll come on if there's relevant information as well. And also, we are going to start a Saturday game day show. Now, we haven't zeroed in on a name yet. We're still working on that. but we're going to have basically a Saturday game day, which we talked about on the podcast the other day. So when I said the other day we weren't sure if it was going to happen or not yet, I was being honest because it was dependent upon Sean accepting the job. He accepted the job later that afternoon. And so we're going to be rocking and rolling with a Saturday game day show. Again, a lot of these details we're going to work out. Right now, we're kind of looking at like 10 to noon in the morning Eastern time before games. Again, it'll be Sean and Vince will be doing that. I'll come on for a segment or two. Ryan may come on if it's like a big recruiting weekend. But what we're trying to give you all is it's not just me all the time or Ryan all the time. We want to try to get as many different voices. We've always wanted to do more interview stuff, but that's not my strength. My strength is me talking, right? I mean, I'm just going to be honest, or providing analysis on our perspective. But, Sean is great at also giving analysis, but Sean is a much better interviewer than me. He thinks outside the box differently than I do. And so I'm really excited that I want to expand the type of content that we have. I want to expand the voices that you all get to hear from. And so I think it's going to be a ton of fun, and I can't wait for it. So that's going to be the first one will be September 3rd. Saturday, September 3rd will most likely be our first game day. We may do one the week before. We're still, again, a lot of stuff we're discussing because there are games the weekend before. So, and we may do like a season kickoff preview kind of thing, but I know for a fact that we're going to start on September 3rd with that. And we're kind of looking at two different ways of doing it. I'd love some feedback on. My initial plan was to talk Notre Dame first, then the big college football games second. A lot of fans have said, hey, we kind of like the idea of doing maybe the first games, the national games first, then Notre Dame games. The reason I'm leaning towards Notre Dame first is because if the Notre Dame conversation goes long, then we can just take away from the second hour of the national college football stuff. Whereas if we do the national stuff for the first hour, then go to the Notre Dame stuff, then if we run out of time, we're running out of Notre Dame content. But I'm open to the conversation, and we're going to still work out the hires. But I knew for a fact that that just getting a guy like Sean Stiers on, it was something we had to do. And so I'm excited about it. And getting Devin on board is something I'm also excited about too. It's going to really, really take on just a whole new angle for what we're doing at Irish Breakdown. So I wanted to announce that first and get that rocking and rolling. So Ryan, I mean, as we've always said, man, we're going to keep trying to grow. I want everyone to know we're not just content with what we're doing now. We're always looking to make this product and this package better.
Well, I think that's why we get along so well, Brian, is the fact that we're a little bit of perfectionists, right? Like, I mean, I know I'm never just what I'm doing, right? Like, I always want to be better than what I did yesterday type of thing. And I think that you kind of echo that same sentiment. So, I mean, I'm not going to be happy until we are number one by a large margin, right? Like, right. I mean, I don't even know if happy is the right word. Like, I would be content at that point. So I'm always, I guess, battling against myself, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think that's kind of what this is symbolic of. It's not that, because I think that we already do the best coverage out there in the Notre Dame landscape, but it's not just about being the best comparative to other people. It's trying to be the best version of yourself, right? So I think that's what this is a symbol of, in my opinion.
And knowing what your strengths are and how other people can join the team and bring strengths that maybe you don't have. And that's what I'm always looking to do. So I'm excited about what we're doing. And so that's not the main content of today's show. We are going to have a recruiting hour, but I did want to announce that to everybody. We talked about Brandon last night, or Devin on the board last night. I announced on Friday night, I believe it was, that Sean was going to be joining our team. So the premium members have known about this for a couple of days, but I want to announce that to all of you. I'm very excited about what we got going on. I'm also excited about the show we've got today. So we are going to have Adon Shuler on. Now, when Ryan first told me that he interviewed Adon Shuler, I was a little weirded out because I'm like, wait a minute, the Hall of Famer's been gone for a while. Like I didn't know it, but Adon Shuler, so that just shows my age. But that is the father of Notre Dame safety commit Adon Shuler, and he is a very engaging, very intriguing guy. And we wanted to get him on the show. Ryan did that, so he was able to interview him this weekend. And we're going to play that for you. So it's about a 27-minute long video of Ryan's interview with Adon Shuler. They're going to talk about Adon's commitment, his recruiting process. The transition aspects was really interesting that I thought when you talked to him about, what was it like for you guys when They went through the coaching change because remember, Adon was committed to Notre Dame well before the coaching change happened. I thought he had a very unique perspective on that. And of course, he's going to talk about Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame coaches, and things along those lines. So it is going to be about 27 minutes. When that is over, we'll quickly address that, and then we will dive into our daily Q&A. So make sure you guys and gals are dropping in your questions and be ready to go. So let's get it going here with Adon Shuler.
Welcome to the Irish Breakdown podcast. Thank you all for tuning in here. An exciting one, of course, Ryan Roberts, the director of recruiting here at irishbreakdown.com. Make sure before we get into this video, because we have a really exciting interview, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this podcast. We're going to give you an insight into one of the top recruits in the 2023 cycle for Notre Dame. And to do that, I have his father, Mr. Adon Shuler, who is the father of Adon Shuler, a very talented safety prospect out of Irvington, right here in New Jersey, where I'm from as well. So I got a Garden State fella with me today. Don, appreciate you again for hopping on, man. I know it's really exciting times for you and your family.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We just, like I said, we just blessed. We just soaking it all in. And, we just enjoying the ride.
And absolutely. I know it's been a little hectic, though. I really wanted to get this one on here, get you specifically, because your son was, I believe, the third recruit that had committed to the Notre Dame class for 2023, committed in November. So when he committed to the Irish, Brian Kelly was still the head coach. Marcus Freeman was obviously on the staff as the defensive coordinator, and most of the defensive staff remains relatively the same. I think it's good for Adon speaking that, Chris O'Leary was retained, obviously the safety coach, which is, I'm sure, a big part. But take me through a little bit, man. First and foremost, maybe before I get to the coaching change stuff, just how excited was Adon to, commit to the Irish, and just take us through a little bit of maybe the early recruiting and why ultimately you feel like he chose, or the family helped him decide that the Irish were the best fit for him?
Well, once he actually got on their radar, it was like, constant communication with him and Coach Freeman, as well as Chad. And, I believe he had a few Zoom meetings with those guys early on. And, they just built a pretty good relationship with him and, with us as well. And then I could kind of say once we went down for our first time visiting the campus, and, Adon had a workout and, everything went well, it was just nice. It was a place. It was different, put it that way. It was definitely different, and we enjoyed it, and we just couldn't get enough of it. And basically, just the relationship just kept building, and with Freeman and O'Leary and Chad as well, and at the end of the day, it wasn't just about football with those guys. It was just about his well-being after football, and education, and the kind of career that he could have, like I said, outside of football, going to Notre Dame.
And before maybe the recruiting process really started to heat up, was it something that you had maybe sat Adon down and just kind of talked about, like, hey, you're obviously a really talented player. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of schools that are going to be interested in you. Let's focus on these things beforehand to, kind of maybe a checklist or a itinerary as far as like, hey, I want to make sure my prospective school hits all these boxes. Was that ever a conversation before the heat started picking up?
Yes, absolutely. Me, him, my wife, we actually, before he even got a first offer, like, we've been actually like talking about this, like, years ahead of time, ever since he played like youth football. So we kind of like always had like a plan, for him and his brothers. And, we just always, kind of like drove that home to them. And so, he kind of was like, all right, before he even got any offers, he kind of was on that path of, we all were on the same path of, all right, this is what you need to do. This is what we're trying to accomplish, for you.
And let me ask you, so obviously I kind of had introed this question a little bit, for the first one. So he commits to Notre Dame, and then a month later, just about, Coach Kelly obviously decides to leave to take the LSU job. Talk to me through like that little transition period. Was Adon ever like, oh, maybe I should reopen things? Should I rethink this decision? Or was it something that was just cemented for him throughout the whole process?
No, for the most part, we built the relationship with Coach Marcus Freeman, as well as Chad and Coach O'Leary. So for the most part, for a day-to-day or every other day type basis, that's who we were dealing with. We were able to do a couple calls with Coach Kelly, when he was there, and we did meet Coach Kelly at one of the visits. But for the most part, like I said, the day-to-day or the week-to-week, it was always Coach Marcus Freeman, O'Leary, and Chad.
And let me ask your opinion maybe about Coach Freeman, because I know you've probably have spoken to him many times at this point. I'm so excited to see the Freeman era, to be honest with you, man. He's
Absolutely.
A really impressive guy. Just love to hear your opinion of Coach Freeman and just how high you think he could take these heights here at Notre Dame.
Oh, it's no doubt about it that Coach Freeman can definitely help change the young men that's going to Notre Dame. He can definitely help them become better men. Better husbands in the future, better fathers, better role models, professionals. When you talk to Freeman, it's all genuine. It's like, and I understand, in today's era of collegiate athletes and Power 5 schools, it's like it's a lot of business, which is unfortunate. Because most of these young men, they play a game that they've been playing since youth, and they develop a passion for it. It's not so much as a business with them. It's more of a passion and a love for the game. And, it's unfortunate some of these schools kind of turn it into a strictly business. But with Freeman and his staff, you don't feel that way at all. You feel like the genuine purpose of each and every one of his staff members, especially him, is for the betterment of whatever athlete decide to go to wherever he's, been at, or with Notre Dame, to have them be a better person once they leave Notre Dame, under his care and watch.
Yeah, no, I think that says it perfectly. I mean, the pitch is just seems very authentic to me, just kind of from an outside perspective. So again, very excited about what Coach Freeman has cooking up, to say the least. Let me take you now a little bit to the actual visiting of South Bend for a second, because I remember I was actually messaging with you the last visit for the blue and gold game, and you said something to me. You messaged back and you said I didn't want to leave, right? So
yeah.
Would love to hear about just what you feel like makes South Bend so special.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, for one, it's so like, it's so private. It's so it's just like you feel when you step foot on campus, you feel successful. Just stepping foot and walking around that campus, you kind of feel successful. And it's like a close-knit family. You may not know a one person on the campus, but as you're walking around, it's like you feel the aura, of the campus. And, I tease Adon all the time. I say, yeah, I still have my eligibility left. So I might be teammates with you. And, we just joke about it, a lot. But, stepping foot on that campus, even with my wife, with his brothers, his younger brothers, everyone loves it. Everyone says, when we going back? When we going back? So it's just, it's just the aura of that place. And it's just a great feeling when you step foot on that campus. It's like, just something that comes over you that just make you want to be successful. And, everyone around you is pushing for success. And it's a great feeling.
When you took Adon up there for the first time, was that also your first time in South Bend?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It was. Yep. And I was a huge Notre Dame fan when I was in high school. I used to like Notre Dame as well.
And now you have a very, very high rooting interest moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it, man. I love it. And let me talk, Don, because I'll say this, when Notre Dame's recruiting at the level that they are right now, your son included, obviously, he's a consensus 4-star, top 150 type of player. I mean, fantastic football player. I think one of the more underrated safeties just in this recruiting cycle in general.
Yeah.
So after Notre Dame is obviously the pick, I mean, even recently, he's gotten offers from Alabama, Georgia. People keep pulling the heat up, man. What's it kind of been like? Maybe a little behind the scenes. If you can just give us a little taste, as far as, I mean, coaches are still coming after him. How have those maybe conversations been with other teams? And is there any part of you that was kind of like, oh, that's interesting, or is it just like at this point it doesn't matter anymore?
Well, like I said, like I said to you in the beginning, we just grateful, blessed, and humble just for people to feel as though, that he's, have enough talent and academics to even invite him for offer a scholarship to their universities. With that, it's so many offers, like you said, that came about after his commitment, which I had no idea it was going to be like that. And, we have talked with a lot of coaches, and, the school that he goes to, his coach is doing a marvelous job at that particular school. So it's like an overwhelming amount of coaches that comes there every week, so we just kind of just keep the bridge open, with other coaches, and just talk to other coaches. Cause like I said, we just humble and greatly appreciate everyone for the most part. So we always do our due diligence and, talk to coaches, answer any question they have, or, things like that.
And I think I saw at the Blue Gold game, I thought I saw, obviously there was a lot of great recruits on campus, guys that were uncommitted as well, like Rodney Gallagher and Jaden Greathouse, and some great players. How much is maybe Adon now taking on the role as far as like he's a main recruiter in this class? He wants to be, this is a great class, right?
Oh yeah. He's been recruiting. I believe he committed in August of last year, and I believe since then he's been recruiting. Since then, and me as well. I'm a huge fan of all of those young men. I mean, as you can see, if anybody follow me on Twitter, they see some of my pictures I post. And, I text the guys on Instagram, the ones that have it, and sometime on Twitter. Because like I tell all those young guys, I say, I'm a huge fan of you guys. And I'm happy that, they're able to further their education as well as their athletics and, committed to Notre Dame and, being able to possibly, well, I know national championship is coming soon. So I just it's a great feeling because I play football, so I'm a huge football fan in general. So when I see those guys, I always, give them a hug and say, hey man, I'm happy. I take pictures with them all the time. And but yeah, we all recruit, but Adon definitely is definitely one of the top recruiters for Notre Dame. Him and my boy Drake. They all actually do a good job, recruiting and trying to, because they want to build something. It's going to be amazing when it all comes together. I can promise you that.
Yeah, I know every time I talk to Adon, he tells me, yeah, man, I'm on him. Don't worry, type of thing. And I mean, apparently, I guess Chad Bowden needs to get you on his recruiting staff, Don. It sounds like you're one of the main ones in this group.
Hey, man, listen, hey, I definitely would appreciate it.
I love it, man. So, Don, I guess I probably should have started this, but I'm going to kind of pull us back for a second because you mentioned you had played football, and I know that I think I saw something on Twitter about you coaching at some points as well, too. So can you take me through just maybe a little bit of your background as a football player and why this game just means so much to your family?
Yeah, well, with me, I played, actually, the funny thing is I played at the same high school that Adon is at now. That's my alma mater as far as high school. At the particular time, I wasn't fortunate enough to get a scholarship and, play in college. I played in the All-Star game, and pretty much I've been coaching, I would say, since the late 90s. Where I'm from, Newark, New Jersey. So I've been coaching since then, even, before, my sons was born. And I just, it's just been a joy for me for coaching. And I still continue to coach, at the youth level. because that's kind of where it starts at, and you kind of like you build relationship with the young kids, and you try to help them, give them pointers to better themselves and moving forward, how to be young men, and let them know that they can, if they would like to use their athletic ability to further their education as well as academics. That's what I just bring to the table for the most part. But
So,
I go ahead.
so sorry. So when you so since you have the youth background as far as coaching, have you also coached all your sons at some point?
Yeah, for the most part, I have been on the staff. I was always a lineman, so I always coached the line. It's just funny that my sons, they didn't put on that type of weight. They was able to be skill players for the most part of their youth career. So, but I always kind of been on the staff for each one of them, and just been around, and just went from there. Just try to help the team win in general.
Yeah. Well, I have a little bit of a coaching background, and I've always told myself that like I get very, when I coach a little bit, I get very headstrong. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to coach my kids because I'm gonna be a little bit over the top. What type of relationship do you have as far as player coach to your own kids?
For me, I'm hard. I'm hard. Like I'm hard. I've thrown took my son, my youngest son, that's now Donovan. He's 8. He's the latest one that I've been coaching with him for the past. He's been in pass for the past 2 years. It's been a few times I've took him and put him on the bench because he wasn't doing. So I'm very critical and hard, and but the thing about it is, we always record everything. We'll go home, we'll watch it on the TV, and we'll break things down, and just teach them how to get better. We work with all types of trainers, and so I figure if they're gonna do it, if they show a interest in it, if it's this their passion, I want to give them everything I can give them to help them be on top.
And one thing I've loved about my conversations with Adon in the past, on the phone and just texting with him and stuff, he's very, for as talented as he is, I mean, and he's an extremely talented kid,
Thank you.
he's also very modest, which is like, I think sometimes you lose that when you kind of become the high 4-star, bordering, top 100 player, all those accolades that come with it. Can you speak to me maybe just a little bit about Adon as a person, a young man, and what makes him have that type of modest personality, and I guess maybe what drives him as a person just in general?
Well, at home, me and my wife, we always preach being humble, because at the end of the day, it's always, we feel as though being humble can, people will see your talent. A lot of times you don't have to broadcast it and things like that, but people will see your talent. I know sometimes you can kind of get caught up in the moment, and you make a play, and that's fine because that's during the game. But it's like we always teach you don't have to go around poking your chest out saying I'm the best, or this this, that, and the third. So we always said work hard. That's the thing, because a lot of times with Adon, he's worked very hard. I mean, it's been times where he played youth league and he might have been like the 4th guy on the depth chart, but by the end of the season he was the number 1 guy just by putting his head down, working hard, and keep grinding. So we just drive that home to all of our kids. Just be humble and just be like be grateful for everything.
And do all your sons, do they play multiple sports too? Because I love the multi-sport backgrounds.
Yeah, they all have done soccer, basketball, football, of course, boxing. Let's see what else, and a little bit of baseball when they were like younger. But those, and track. Well, track.
And I guess specifically for Adon, has he just been like one of those naturals that's just like good at every sport he plays? He seems like that type of kid.
Well, you know what it is? I'm gonna give it to you like this. He have a competitive spirit, I would say, of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. He does not like to lose. He loves to win, and he's very competitive. They all are. They compete. I mean, it's funny. You got to see them in the house. They compete doing push-ups. It's very competitive. So that's what kind of drives them to kind of like always want to like be on top and always want to win. And
I mean, and you can see that in every area of his game, to be honest. Like, he's one of the guys who I've told people that I think that he could play the roof. He could come down and play in the box. He could play in the slot. Like, I feel like he can do a little bit of everything. How have you seen just his game evolve maybe over the last couple years? You mentioned, that you had a pretty good inkling that he was going to be a really good player pretty early on. But, I mean, over the last couple of years, it just seems like he's, just exploded as far as the quality of player he is.
Well, what happened was once he kind of like figure out his role, he's a student of the game. Like, that's one thing since he was, I want to say about 8-9 years old, he would watch like ESPN classics. He would watch football and, basketball, and he would like break down plays, and he's been that way. So like I said, he always wants to be, he doesn't like losing. He's very competitive. So with him, anything that he feel as though in himself that he's not mastering, or he's not, if this safe is something like being a DB, he maybe say, coming out of doing a speed turn, he will work. He will say, Dad, let's go to the park, or whatever the situation is, or if it's a trainer that we know, a DB specialist, we'll set that up for him. So that's how he drives home. He wants to be the top. He wants to be the best. So, and a lot of times, he will work out at night, 11, 12 o'clock. I don't bother him because his grades are still good, so I don't bother him. He, I see him lifting or, push-ups or whatever the situation is. So he definitely, and then what he's surrounded by, the guys that he's surrounded by is like top tier athletes. So everyone kind of pushes each other. So that helps out a great deal too.
And I only have 2 questions left for you. Again, I really appreciate your time. This is fantastic. Getting a lot of great stuff out of this one. Let me, I guess, so I saw the video that the photo that you posted a couple of days ago of Adon, and you're like, yeah, he's ready, man. And I was like, oh, that young man looks like a junior in college right now. It's pretty crazy. Talk to me a little bit about this offseason. I know you guys have obviously been doing some traveling, getting ready for season, doing all that type of stuff. What's that been like for your family and him in general?
Yeah, so we came up with a plan. Well, he came up with the plan actually after last season was over with. He said, he wanted to get bigger, he wanted to get stronger, he wanted to get faster. So right away, we kind of set that in motion. And also, I wanted him to play. Last year, he played around 190. So I said, okay, let's bulk you. Let's get up to 200, and let's gain more speed, because before you know it, he's going to be an early graduate, which he's actually going to be the first kid from his high school. He goes to a public high school, which is Irvington High. He's going to be, they did a tremendous job, I must say, with the principal, his coach, his athletic director, as well as the superintendent, in putting in place a plan for him to leave early. He's going to be the first kid ever out of Irvington High to leave early, graduate early, so that way he can start, his courses and everything at Notre Dame. So like I said, we put a plan together, put on more weight, more speed, more strength, and that's how we kind of, it's been going well. It's been going well.
I love that. Yeah, no, that is an accomplishment right there. I didn't even think about the whole public school side of that too, right? Like him coming through there and trying to figure out the early enrollee process. That's got to been. Yeah,
his coach, Ashley Smoke Pierre, he's been doing a tremendous job for some years at Irvington High School. A tremendous job.
I love that. And I guess my last thing is, with your background now, as far as like you're a main recruiter in the process, and Don's a main recruiter in the process. I hope a Jaden Greathouse, a Rodney Gallagher, those type of dudes are listening to this. And I know for a fact that a lot of Notre Dame faithful are listening to this. So Don, can you just speak, just final thoughts as far as how excited you are being a part of the process, and for any other recruits that may be thinking like, do I want to make that jump? Again, Notre Dame, why is it such a great place in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, you can't go wrong with Notre Dame. I mean, you got to look at the aspect of it. You got to look at the connection of it. You will be set for life. I can guarantee you will definitely be set for life. I have been speaking with so many alums from Notre Dame, so many great people from Notre Dame that's just pouring wisdom and, willing to reach out. And my son hasn't even stepped foot in a class at Notre Dame. On top of that, you have a chance to win a national championship as well as go to the NFL because it's great football there. I mean, it's great football at Notre Dame, and it's a great atmosphere. So, I mean, to all the recruits that's kind of thinking, well, maybe no, get on in there, sign up, Freeman, at whatever position it is you at, your position coach. I can guarantee you he's a great coach. I have so many great conversations with other position guys that on the offense, as well as defensive coaches. Definitely the place you want to be.
And I love the mention of the alumni. That's one thing. I was at the Blue and Gold weekend, and the fact that they had nearly 300 former alumni, former players. I mean, impressive. I guess I said that was the last question, but maybe just for that one. I mean, how cool was that Blue and Gold weekend being around everyone?
It was awesome. I had a great time. I mean, you talking about a time where you definitely don't want to leave. It's like you kind of just want, okay, the Blue and Gold game, go watch the game, and everybody just come on back and finish eating and having a good time. And we did that actually. It was just with smaller parties, and it was actually it was a great weekend because the 23 recruits, the ones that's committed, and even some of the ones that were not committed, got a chance to mesh more in person, as well as we were able to link up with parents, which was great. I mean, and so it was great, and we still building these relationships as it is, like me and Cooper Flanagan family, the Drake Drake family, his father, we just like building really good relationships with everyone. And it's good. It's great because now it's like, we're in New Jersey, we're 10 hours away. Let's say Drake is not maybe an hour away from Notre Dame. He can, if they want to get away, Doc can always go with Drake, and, his father, Jeremy. It's just great. Like, to be in that group of great people that just want to see everybody succeed. You can't beat it.
And I'm sure you left that week and you're like, Adon, we might not need to try to reclassify you to 2022 so you don't have to leave. You can just stay here right now. I love it again.
Absolutely.
Joined by Adon Shuler, the father of Adon Shuler, 2023 recruits committed to the University of Notre Dame. Incredible, talented safety out of Irvington High School in New Jersey. Adon, this was fantastic, man. Again, I really appreciate your time so much. Looking forward to seeing your son's great career in the blue and gold, but thank you so much for the time today.
All right. I want to thank Irish Breakdown for having me on. Thank you, Ryan. I definitely appreciate it. Let's go, Irish.
So that is Ryan's interview with Adon Shuler, the father of Adon Shuler. There was one of the comments in there, Ryan, was during the show, was Ryan loves him some Adon Shuler, and of that there is no doubt. He is a very talented player. He was one of those guys that, when I first watched him as sophomore film, and I was like, kid, I didn't love him because he didn't look super explosive on film. But the one thing I said then was, this kid's really smart. I mean, that's the one thing you notice. This kid's always in the right position. And then as a junior, his athleticism kind of took a tick up, and you're like, okay, now you get why Notre Dame likes him so much. So just any takeaways, Ryan, that you had from that you just kind of wanted to follow up on from your interview with Mr. Shuler?
I mean, it's stuff that we've already known, right? Like we've known the impact that Marcus Freeman's had on the trail. We know obviously impact in recruiting as well, but it's always nice to hear it, right? I mean, I think the first time that Don had mentioned Chad during the interview,
pretty early.
Multiple people said Chad in the chat. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's just the biggest thing for me is that they're really selling all areas of the program, right? And I think that that's really refreshing to see. And honestly, I mean, I'm not trying to throw any shade at Brian Kelly. I promise I'm not, but I think it's pretty telling that, he mentioned a lot of the fact that, like, hey, we were dealing with Coach Freeman, Coach O'Leary, and Chad. Like, that was our point of contact, right? So
which
think
is
it's
normally the case for
sure.
so that's not a shot on Brian. I mean, it's normally the case that you're going to be more familiar with your position coach and the coordinator on your side of the ball, right? So, and
Absolutely.
it's not often that a coordinator gets promoted to a head coaching situation like that, so that definitely changed that. So, yeah, it's not a shot on Brian Kelly.
No, it's not. I'm more speaking to the fact that it is a collaborative effort on the recruiting trail. Those three were just constantly mentioned, and it's a case where it's still happening, right? And that was a big thing. Was like Alabama and Georgia have both offered pretty recently for Adon, and he's a fantastic football player. And the fact of the matter is that we know when you're recruiting to this level, other programs are going to keep coming. Right? They're going to keep pressing Adon Shuler and try to get him to decommit and try to get him to flip. It's no doubt about it. Like that stuff is going to happen. But you saw that the fact that I think it's just such a collaborative effort, Brian, right? Like getting Adon Shuler comfortable and making him continue to feel like a priority. It's not like you got him in the class and then you just stop. Those guys talk to him constantly. They're not done recruiting him. They're keeping him in this class because he means a lot to them. And then it's always nice to hear that he's taken on a big recruiting role now that he is in the class. His father obviously has a heavy hand in that stuff as well. They mentioned Drake Bowen as a big person in this class as far as being a recruiter that is already one of the committed players. So just a lot of great stuff, I thought, overall from that interview.
And obviously, as he mentioned, there's a lot of recruiting going on. And you think about it as, well, Notre Dame, they're not going to keep that number one spot. And I just want to remind people, Notre Dame's not even halfway to their number for this class. They have 12 commitments. They want to get to 25. So there's a lot more that has to get added. And what gets added is going to determine whether this does stay as a top number one class or top 3 or top 5 or if it falls out. So it's going to be very, very interesting. But you can be sure that Don Shuler and Adon Shuler are both going to be very important parts of that. He mentioned Drake Bowen, obviously, and as being a very key part of that as well. So it's going to be fun to watch this play out, and I'm looking forward to seeing his senior season as well, because and then also he talks the talk about Adon's academics and they're fine and all that kind of stuff, but you always wonder what does a parent view as fine, right? Is it eligible? But then you see the other day that Adon was named to the National Honor Society. And had he's tweeting out pictures of him in a suit at the National Honor Society banquet, and you're like, yeah, okay, yeah. What he means by fine is that you're thriving here and here, and you love to see that. It's not just, hey, get your grades so you can play football. It's you need to dominate here, you need to dominate there, and you love kids like that because kids like that are going to fit in very, very well at a place like Notre Dame.
And I know we talk a lot about the fact that recruiting is now relentless from the staff, right? But I also think that they are recruiting relentless players. Because the one thing about Adon that you mentioned, Brian, I think that he's a good all-around athlete. But the thing that I think separates him is you mentioned the IQ aspect of everything, but you can tell that kid works extremely hard. Like you can just look at the picture that he just posted and just kind of see that fact that this kid doesn't have an off day, right? Like he is putting in the work each and every day.
Ryan, before I know I was paused.
Okay.
Before we start, I need you to connect your mic. Just do that. Take care of that because your last couple times you've talked, it's gotten that weird thing going on. So we have to figure out what's going on with that. So, anyway, Don Shuler, great interview. I was able to kind of get that edited up this weekend, and we wanted to play that on the show today because. Really, really good stuff, and talented player, and I think that's the thing that you look at when a kid like a Don Shuler is in the bottom half of your class from a ranking standpoint. This early, you've got a pretty good recruiting class, and I'm very curious too to see how his ranking is going to be impacted this year by. His senior season because he's a talented kid. I don't think his ranking is reflected with what we saw on film as a junior. And, sometimes when you look at it, it's one of those situations where, now that he's committed, is there a need to bump his recruiting up, his ranking up? And that's kind of factors into it. But I'm very curious to see how that goes. And if he's able to kind of really have a dominant senior season and maybe see his ranking go up. So we'll see. Ryan, with that said, that is the interview with Adon Shuler. Now it's time to get to our mailbag. And so what we decided to do today, instead of having another topic that we dive into, is we're going to have a mailbag. So we're just going to go right to the top, and we're going to jump in right here on your questions. Ryan, you want to do a quick mic check before we get started?
Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
Yeah, there you go. Okay,
All
we're
right.
good to go. All right, Salty Virginia Peanuts asks, what is Notre Dame's status with Darius Hayes? That's a 2024 linebacker from Florida. And what is Irish Breakdown's assessment of his talent? So, Ryan, you go ahead and kick off with the status of Darius Hayes. We actually, there was an update. So, Salty Virginia Peanuts, you are a part of our message board, I believe. And we did have an update from Brian Smith the other day. But go ahead, Ryan, and share that one.
Yeah, I mean, so he made his first trip to campus pretty recently. For people that don't know too much, he's a 2024 linebacker who is about 6'4", 215 pounds, 220 pounds, somewhere in that ballpark. The kid is a really impressive, good-looking prospect on the hoof. A kid that, early on, he's got the GPA side of everything, right? Like, he's an academic kid. Everything kind of fits. But he's like one of those kids where you just like watch the film and you're just kind of like, whoa, I don't know if he's going to get out of the South, right? But there's interest. So that's what you need a starting point. They got him to campus, which is always a great sign of things to come, in my opinion.
Yeah, getting a kid from Florida that's as ranked as high as he is up for a spring game is certainly a feat. And he's talked in that update with Brian Smith. He talked about, I think, Clemson and Stanford are the two games he's looking at right now as far as where he's going to go, which I think should tell us all what night games Notre Dame is going to have this year. It's going to be Stanford and Clemson, most from the comments that we've heard from him and then other recruits talking about when they're going to come. Because Notre Dame usually has their big recruiting weekends on those night games. And so Stanford being like mid-October, I think it's like the 15th or so, mid-October is when that game is. And obviously Clemson is the first Saturday of November. My thoughts of him as a player are, I mean, he's a very raw player, which again is a theme we use a lot with sophomores. He shows some instinct, but the technique's not there yet. He takes false steps and all that. But man, this kid's talented, and as he continues to mature technically, which kids do, he still has 2 years of high school football left. But he can run. Like when I first saw his offer, and the first thing you do is you kind of look up his bio, and okay, 6'4", I think he's like listed like 215. You're thinking like, okay. Mike linebacker, maybe a kid who's more of a viper, a kid you're going to put on the edge and rush, one of those two things. No, this kid can fly. I mean, he's a true sideline to sideline guy, and he can thump. I mean, he arrives at the football with some bad intentions, and he is an incredibly naturally powerful kid. And as the instincts come, I mean, this kid has like future 5-star written all over him, Ryan. I mean, he has the tools you can't teach. And once the term you like to use, which I love, by the way, that once the teachables catch up to the natural God-given ability, this kid's going to be really, really good.
I mean, he's one of those linebackers that could literally play every linebacker spot in your system, right? Like I could see him in a traditional like 4-3 look. Like he could be a Mike, he could be a Will with that speed, and he could be a Sam. Like I would love to see him in some underfronts, just coming up on the line of scrimmage. I think if you're a 3-4 team, this kid could rush the passer on the outside too. He's got the length for it. I mean, this is I'm not going to compare him to Micah Parsons because Micah Parsons is a different cat, right? But stylistically, he's got some of that in him because you could just see him do a little bit of everything on the football field with that pursuit quickness and that length that he has.
Well, I definitely see him as a Micah Parsons when you look at what Micah was as a prospect. I mean, I think Darius can be that, and I don't remember seeing Micah as a sophomore. I only saw him as a junior and senior. So I think that's a fair comparison. I mean, you're not saying he's going to be as a high school senior what Micah Parsons is for the Cowboys. I think his prospects are very similar. And Micah Parsons, actually, a lot of people don't know this. Micah Parsons was very interested in Notre Dame. Like he was actually in the Notre Dame group chat with the commits. But there were some reasons, obviously, that Notre Dame wasn't going to be able to get him into the class. But I'm not talking about like buying him. It's just there's just some things that he wasn't going to be able to make it at Notre Dame. But maybe Darius is different. We'll find out. So good question. 99 problems, but BK ain't one. Has two-parter, actually a couple two-parters, and then another. First part of this is it looks like Notre Dame can take one more linebacker and one more defensive lineman. I see Impemba as more of an end long term. So you think it's really more of a Jason Moore or Impemba scenario than it is Impemba or Osbury. and then the second part is, if you do think so, what combo would you prefer, Jason Moore and Alsbury or Mpemba and Alsbury? I'll just answer this quickly, Ryan. There is no way, and I'm not guessing. I'm telling you what the facts are. There's no way in heck that Notre Dame is turning down any of those three kids. No chance in the world. If Samuel Mpemba, Jason Moore, and Jaden Alsbury all want to come to Notre Dame, they will all have a spot at Notre Dame. So we don't even have to think about that scenario. So they would take all those guys. And Mpemba long term could be an end. I think that people are assuming that based on the fact that of what he looks like. But if you watch the kid run, you're like, okay, yeah, this kid could be a linebacker. Do I see him as a rover? No, not really. I think he's more of a Mike Will kind of guy that could then grow into a Viper, or he could end up growing to a big end. I mean, he's got a tremendous frame, but I wouldn't just assume that he can't play linebacker, right? I think just let the process play out. And the reality is for Notre Dame is they don't really view him as a linebacker. They don't really view him as a defensive lineman. They view him as just a football player that they got to find a place for. And I think they're going to be open to what that role is, right? And so, like, if you get him, you say, well, his ideal position is Viper. Well, he's not going to be a Viper and just sitting behind Keon Keeley all the time. So if you think he's an end, then maybe he's a big end. Maybe he is, like you talked about. Maybe they find a role as in like a, the Sam linebacker. So, like, I think that's what they're doing a little bit with Jordan Botelho. When he's in a rover, they don't ask him to do the same things that they're asking Jack Kaiser to do. And I think we've kind of convinced ourselves that the rover role is kind of like what it was with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Doesn't necessarily have to be that way, especially if depending on what you have at safety. Yep. And so they could go to a 3-3 look with him as, a rover, so to speak, and have him kind of do a lot of things that Jordan Botelho does. He's drop into coverage, play curl flat, play the flats, but then be a pass rusher, a run defender, things like that, which is very similar. And now all of a sudden you're doing that, and you don't necessarily need him to be a quote-unquote big end, but you can use him with Keon Keeley in those type of situations. So there's a lot of things that a coach like Al Golden with an NFL background in multiple fronts and all that can look at a kid like Sam Mpemba and says, if we can't figure out a way to get that kid on the field, then we need to find something else to do with our careers. And I think that's the reality of it.
Well, I would say this, Brian, just a quick note on the rover position is when you really think about it, right? And we're talking alignment.
Your mic's gone, so I couldn't hear anything you were saying. It was gone. So don't know what's causing that. We're gonna have to figure that out. But go on to the next question. 99 Problems BK ain't one. Where does Josiah Wagner rank on the list of cornerback targets, and how would you rank the following in terms of confidence standing? Josiah Wagner, Micah Tease, Calvin Simpson-Hunt, Christian Gray, Micah Bell. Is Jair Hill still a target? I mean, we're still kind of putting together a list of where things stand. Honestly, the problem is a lot of this we're not going to really know until guys show up on campus. We're not going to really know who, where guys stand with Notre Dame. Where does Notre Dame stand with these guys until they get on campus? I mean, that's really going to be the issue. And so until we figure that out, look, we could sit there and say, oh, the staff really likes so-and-so, but he's never been on campus. And so they may get him on campus, like, well, this kid's an inch and a half shorter than we thought he was. Or, hey, the kid didn't like it or didn't fit in or things along those lines. So I think right now what I can say confidently is that the three kids that I know for a fact right now Notre Dame likes a lot and like Notre Dame are Micah Tease, Christian Gray, and Micah Bell, and I'm only giving them in the order that you have them on your list. I think Notre Dame wants to get at least two guys from that group. If they could get all three, they're going to get all three. And obviously right now with Micah Tease, he's far from a sure thing to Notre Dame. I think Ryan and I have talked a lot about this in that we think Oklahoma's now going to be a player again. That's the in-state school. Their other USC is a player for him. He's going to take all 5 of his official visits this spring. So we're confident that he's going to do that or this spring and summer. And we'll dive into that. So we'll see how kind of things stand there. Christian Gray, we've talked a lot about. Notre Dame's obviously in his top 2 to 3. He likes Notre Dame a lot, but he also likes LSU a lot. They hired his former high school coach to be their DB coach. And so there's a connection there. Ohio State has been on him as well. Micah Bell, to me, is the guy that I think right now Notre Dame probably has the best shot at. I know they like him a lot. I've talked to them, talked to people, around that recruitment about him since he's been offered. and the staff likes him a lot. I can say that confidently. Josiah Wagner, it's still kind of early there in regards to the relationship. I don't really know how he feels about Notre Dame right now. I know Ryan has talked to him and briefly, but he's still getting to know about Notre Dame. Notre Dame is still getting to know about him. It's still very early in the process with him. So we'll have a better idea of when he's on campus. And as we reported on Irish Breakdown's message board, this is why you got to be on there, man. We reported, I think it was over a week ago, that Calvin Simpson-Hunt would not be coming to Notre Dame. He is no longer a target for Notre Dame in the 2023 class of cornerbacks. So they have moved on to other players. They canceled that visit, and they've moved on to other players. Last one from 99 Problems BK1. I'm sorry for the Dante Moore question, but what do you think his timeline looks like as of today to make a decision? I have no idea. And if Notre Dame lands him, could they get back in the mix for Jaylen Brown? I don't think they're really concerned about getting back in the mix with Jaylen Brown at this point in time, to be completely honest with you. I think they would much rather get Tyler Williams. If they could use a commitment from Dante Moore to help them with anybody, it'd be Tyler Williams. I think that's who they would rather make a push for than Jaylen Brown, in my opinion, at this point in time. Coach Bent 574 asks, let's see here. I'm gonna see if you have a second part to your question. Let me just scroll up here to where your question is. See if I get there's a part two. Yep, here we go. I know quarterback is important, and the obvious choice is still wanting all three. But would you rather have Dante or Jagasol and Freeling? Or would you also get Avery or a comparable quarterback? Look, the reason I don't like answering questions like this, because it always comes across like, well, when you say you want this kid, it means you don't think those other guys are good, or you don't want that guy. It can always be a little challenging to answer that, and then seeing who takes it and runs with it and says, oh, so and so didn't say you were good, or so and so doesn't think you can do this. And so I don't love answering those questions, because the reality is I'd love to have all three of them. I don't want to it doesn't have to be an or. But the reality is Notre Dame is going to have an easier time replacing and developing tackles than they have recruiting top quarterbacks. So if I could only have one, I mean, if the answer is, would you rather have Jagasol, Freeling, and like Arch Manning or Jaden Rashada instead of just Dante Moore? I mean, that's a different conversation, but that's not realistic, right? The reality is you want Dante Moore, but then getting Dante only helps you with landing those other guys. So I would always take the big time quarterback. I think landing a guy like Dante Moore is going to have such an impact on your football team, not just from a practical, does it help you win games, but also it's going to have a big impact in regard to just what you can do else on the recruiting trail. So let's just get this out of the way, Ryan. Hopefully this will sound a little better now. Welcome to the new from Antoine Porsche Rideau. Welcome to the two new members. Thank you for saying that. Question for you, both of you. What is Notre Dame's chances with Rodney Gallagher on Wednesday? So let's give it a shot, Ryan.
All right, let's give it a shot. It is trending in the wrong direction, and we've kind of talked about that on the board a little bit. Things have gone in West Virginia's way. There's a little bit of a backstory on the board if you want to kind of take a little deeper look to it, but right now it is not looking good on Notre Dame's side of things.
Yep, that's it. So we will not be having a show whenever he goes live on Wednesday. As of right now, that is the plan. Dan Hart says, Ryan, talk about Adon Shuler's response to the question about Coach Freeman. He mentioned nothing about football on the field. That's very telling.
Well, I think the word that we kind of settled on was authentic when we were having the conversation, right? And I think that that's the biggest selling point. I mean, you know that when you're at Notre Dame, you're going to play high-level football. You're going to play a national schedule. And the football side of it should be a no-brainer with the staff that Notre Dame now has, right? Like that's what gets you really excited. But I think the thing that really, really gets me excited more than anything is the fact that not only do I have confidence in what Marcus Freeman's building, but I also have the confidence in how he's doing it, right? And I think that that's the authentic kind of approach that he has to the recruiting process. And I think that resonates a lot with parents specifically, right? Like Don wants his son to go to Notre Dame, not just because they're a great football team that he thinks are going to win a national championship, which he truly does, but it's a simple fact that also he knows that he is going to be a great person, a great father, a great brother. He's going to be a great husband. Like everything about him is going to be better because he was a part of the program and the alumni aspect of it and the ability to have those connections long term. I think it's a full scope approach by Marcus Freeman, and I think you saw that perfectly with how Don kind of presented his perspective.
You hear that a lot from kids, Ryan. They'll talk about their conversation with Coach Freeman, and it's rarely about the fit on the football field. He's really taken a lot of pride in the I'm the head football coach mentality, and that my job is not necessarily anymore to teach you blocking, tackling. My job is to hire coaches that are going to teach that, and then I'm going to set the agenda for what we do. But as the head coach, my biggest priority is developing you as a young man. He seems to really take a lot of pride in that. And it's real. And I think that's what because he talked about, I think he might have used, I don't know if he used the word genuine, but as you mentioned, like you get that feel. I can't remember the specific word he used, but it's definitely that feel of this guy's shooting me straight. There's something parents really like and appreciate that. And this guy's going to look out for my kid, whether he's a great football player or not. And I think that's even more important for a parent at this point in time. Kevin Carter had a question. I want to get to it, but there was, I know, a earlier part to that question that I want to bring it up because he's asking about what Notre Dame should be doing at quarterback. And yes, hey, Brian Ryan, I still agree with the process for more and still not concerned. That being said, I always love that. Still not concerned, but with that being said, knowing when he commits, it will bring another level of recruiting. Do you stay after the current wide receivers or do you go further down the board to not risk losing on the receiving class? Curious because it could be a high risk, high reward. I don't think going further down the board at quarterback really has the impact at on the recruit receivers you want. The reality is if you lose other receivers because you don't have Dante right now, that's the reality of it. And that's why I wish Dante would have made a decision sooner because it could have had a bigger impact. I mean, who knows what other guys are doing right now if Dante was part of the class at this point in time. But, I mean, he's got to do what he's got to do. He's got to do what's best for him first, then he can figure out the rest. But in this day and age, just because a kid's committed – does anyone think that if Dante Moore picks Notre Dame or Jaden Greathouse picks Notre Dame or Monroe Freeling picks Notre Dame, they're everybody's like, well, we gave it our best shot, move on to the next guy. They're going to move on to the next guy, but they're going to keep recruiting those kids. We've seen it with Keon Keeley. We've seen it with Peyton Bowen. We've seen it with Adon Shuler. All these kids are still getting recruited. Braylon James, they're all still getting recruited. It's just you've got to make sure you keep him in the class. But if you are able to get Dante, then all of a sudden your circumstances have changed. And so I would still get back in on the kids that you want if you want them. Now, I personally would move on from Rodney Gallagher as much as I like him as a player, but you're picking West Virginia. And for the reasons that we believe he's picking West Virginia is like, maybe he's not a kid that you would necessarily be a great fit at Notre Dame. Right. And maybe he's better off at there. He can be a big fish in a small pond. Right. And I don't mean that critically. It's not an insult to Rodney. It's just every kid's looking for something different. And that's okay. But you have to decide, is this really the kind of kid that we think is going to thrive here on and off the field? And I think that's kind of the decision behind what I would do if I was in Notre Dame's shoes is some kids that have committed elsewhere, I'd stay on. Other kids, you're like, you got to think about why they picked another school and whether or not that kind of mentality is something that you think is going to work for what you do. So, look, it is a high risk, high reward situation. Ryan, we've been saying that from day one, but it's what you have to do to get him. And you have to stay the course, in my opinion. At this point in time, especially, you have to stay the course.
Oh, I agree completely. I think that the two major.
Try it again. You think the two major?
I was going to say, I think that the two major players that people are going to point to for the question is Carnell Tate and Rodney Gallagher, obviously, right? But especially for Rodney Gallagher situation, it's not because they don't have a quarterback in the class right now, right? If Dante Moore was in the class, is his situation any different? I mean, I don't think that affects that one at all. Like in the Carnell Tate one, we've talked about why that one went the other way, right? And that's also not a quarterback decision, right? So I just push back on it a little bit, Kev, just because I think that I think that we're looking at a situation where even if Dante Moore was committed right now, I don't think that changes the decision-making process of Rodney Gallagher or Carnell Tate. I think that we're still in the same situation that we are right now from a Notre Dame perspective. Now, Will it help with some targets on the board? Yeah, it'll help some situations. But I think those two are going to make people be a little hyperbolic to the Notre Dame recruiting of quarterbacks right now and being all in. But really in its essence, I don't think that Dante Moore not being in the class right now for Notre Dame is why Cornell Tate is trending away from Notre Dame. It's not why Ronnie Gallagher is trending away from Notre Dame. I don't think those have anything to do with one another.
I think the only one that I would curious about it mattering would be Rodney Gallagher. I'd be curious how that would be. But I think at the end of the day, I don't know if it would have been enough to get him. I think what it would have done is maybe he still stays on the visit plan. Maybe that would be the thing that would impact. But the fact that he's just canceling all his visits and making decisions, like, okay, if that's where he wants to be, that's where he can be. And that's fine. I mean, nice coach, and, it's close to home. He's starting from home, and everybody's got to make decisions that are best for them. And not every decision that doesn't work out, like just because a kid can believe that academics are important to me, but he can maybe look at it and say, but for what I want to study, or for what I think my strengths are, or my own confidence level, I'm not sure if that's the place for me. This place is going to give me a quality education as well for more of what I'm trying to do. So I just look at it and I say, look, he's got to make what decision he thinks is best for him, right? And if he thinks the best thing for him is to go to West Virginia, then more power to him. I hope the Notre Dame fans leave him alone if he makes that decision. And not everything is some kind of big negative. Sometimes kids just sometimes kids make bad decisions in that it's not going to work out, but that's part of life, right? And it may seem like a bad decision for us and for all the things we think are important, but we're not Rodney, and we're not walking in his shoes, and he's got to make what he thinks the best decision is for him. So I would just tell Notre Dame fans, if he does pick West Virginia, wish him luck and move on. And that's the reality of it. But, who knows how that one played out. But to Ryan's point, 100% agree. At this point in time with Cardinal Tate and what he's looking for in a college, I don't care who's committed to Notre Dame a quarterback. I don't think it would matter. Matter of fact, Ryan, I think it might actually be problematic, because I think if Dante were committed to Notre Dame, I think he'd still be stringing Notre Dame along a lot more and making him think maybe they do have a shot when in reality they don't. And so at least now right? If Dante Moore would be the only reason you'd consider us, then you need to go somewhere else, because that's not enough of a reason to pick Notre Dame, right? If you don't really have any interest in our program beyond who the quarterback is, then this probably isn't the place for you. And I truly believe that. I mean, that's meaning you shouldn't pick a place just because if Notre Dame doesn't have any other things that you're looking for except they've got Dante Moore, then you need to go somewhere else. Because I don't think you're gonna thrive. And so that would be my 2 cents on that. I'm not sure how you feel about that, Ryan, but we can certainly have plenty of time to talk about that here over the next couple months. Tyler Benge, which one of the 2024 quarterbacks has the higher upside? Julian Sand, CJ Carr, or Adrian Posse? What's your thoughts, Ryan?
Hopefully the mic issues don't protest. My apologies to everybody in the chat. I know some people are upset about it. My apologies from that instance. If we're talking about these three, I think it really depends on what system you're running, to be honest with you, Brian. I don't know if you've watched a ton of Adrian Posse, but I would say that he has the strongest arm of these three pretty comfortably, and I think he has the most upside from just a pure passing perspective. But I think the thing that you get with both Sane and Carr is I think they're actually pretty good athletes too, right? Like I think they can move out of the pocket a little more than a Posse can. But I'll say that for the system that Notre Dame's running, I like CJ Carr the best. I think he kind of brings both worlds there, right? From a accuracy perspective, from a consistency perspective, I think his arm is plus in that regard too. I would say that Sane and Posse both have stronger arms than Carr does, but I like kind of the all-around game that Carr brings from that perspective. So I would personally have Carr number one, and then it gets really hairy between Sane and Posse just because they're such different players. But I will say I put it on the board when Posse announced that he is visiting Notre Dame in early June. Kid has a big-time arm. So there's a lot of upside with all three of those players, but I think I like Carr the best out of the trio.
I'm in the same place. I like him the most. I think the thing about CJ Carr too is I see him as a kid whose skill set's really going to take off as he fills out. If you look at him, right, he's still kind of a tall, skinny kid. He's got a good arm, but it's not like a rocket arm. I think that's going to get stronger. I think his accuracy is there. His ball placement's there. He throws with good timing. I think he's had a really good offseason, so I think he's going to have much better film. He's a top 50 top 50 player for me. He's not a 5-star kid yet, but he's got that kind of tools and that kind of upside. And so I think he's the highest. I've got to watch Adrian Posse more. I've seen him, but I didn't really study him because I don't think he's in that top group of players. But I do think Notre Dame's going to get him on campus in hopes that I wouldn't be shocked if when he comes, he's doing part of the camp as opposed to just coming up and visiting. I would be willing to bet that it's going to be up to be part of the camp, right? So they're going to get a chance to see him throw in person. The other guy that I would throw into that conversation that needs to be on there is Jaden Davis. I think he's a kid that Notre Dame is recruiting. Now, I don't think Notre Dame is necessarily his leader, but he has said some really good things about Notre Dame. I definitely don't think they're his leader, but I think he has some interest in Notre Dame. I know they're trying to get him up on campus this summer as well. He'd be the quarterback that I would put in the highest upside conversation with CJ Carr because he's a really raw kid with a lot of tools, really like what he brings to the table, and really look forward to seeing what he can develop into as well. But all those kids are talented. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen back-to-back quarterback classes as good as the 23 and 24 classes. Because they're not on Dylan Raiola right now. He's coming to Ohio State. He's a very talented kid. 2022 was not a great quarterback year at all. 2021 was a pretty good quarterback class. There were some guys at the top that I really liked. I thought there were some overrated kids in the class. 20 was not a great quarterback class, top to bottom. There's some guys at the top. 23 and 24 are really good quarterback classes so far, Ryan, because they have two things that you have to be a great quarterback class. You have to have really good talent at the top, which I think it does. I mean, you talk about Dylan Raiola, just off the top of my head, CJ Carr, Jaden Davis, Julian Saint are all top 50 to type players. And those are just some of the guys that I've seen, but it also has great depth so far. And when you're talking about the depth of a quarterback class and they're just sophomores, there's going to be more jumping into the class as kids start stepping into starting lineups as juniors. And so it's a really strong 2-year haul for sure. And not necessarily Notre Dame related, but just more from a recruiting standpoint. I really like the fact that it's got that. So you feel like there's a chance that Notre Dame should, to be honest with you, be able to get a pretty good quarterback out of one of those two classes.
I would say that's one of the stronger position groups early on in 2024. Quarterback is loaded, man. It really is. I mean, those guys, you mentioned Raiola that's now committed to Ohio State. That kid's the real deal too. I mean, there are some really talented players. Posse might have the lowest upside of anybody that we've talked about so far, but he's got a big time arm, man. So yeah, that 2024 is fantastic. We saw 2023 obviously has a lot of great players as well, but 2024 might be equally as impressive when it's all said and done. I think that's the type of upside it has.
Agreed. And we had a question about it. Well, actually, no, that was a comp question. We'll get into that another time. Coleman Smith asks, would y'all rather have Notre Dame take Elijah Page or Joe Otting as a fifth lineman? What are their similarities and differences?
Well, I mean, I guess starting with similarities and differences is probably the better way, right, to illustrate why my thought process is this way. I mean, Elijah Page out of Pinnacle is a true offensive tackle. Like, I could see him being a left tackle long-term. Good size, good length, developing power. He needs to get improved in that department, but he's got really quick feet. He's got good technique, and he understands how to attack leverage in the passing game. So there's a high upside, I think, as a pass blocking offensive tackle. I think that there's upside there, and I think he's got the chops to do it in run game too. I don't think that there's a lack of aggression. I just think there's a lack of power right now. Joe Otting's completely different. He's a pure interior guy, but he is about as physical of an offensive lineman as you'll find. Good flexibility, good foot quickness, and he is a dog. But his thing is that, like, he needs to get significantly heavier right now. He's only about 260, 265 pounds. His coach said he's, 270-ish now, but we'll see when the season starts. He plays in the 260s last year. So,
Ryan, I gotta interrupt you on Joe Otting because his mom reached out to me and she wanted me to let you know that you put his sophomore basketball stats on there. He actually dropped 16 points a game last year in basketball. So I'm saying that yes, he was an all-conference player. I'm joking about that. She did reach out. She loved the article. I'm totally kidding about that. Yeah. She did love the article, but she did point out that he actually the 8.8 points per game was his sophomore season. Because if you watch this kid's film, right, he can ball. I mean, you talk about athletic. I mean, you talk about athleticism where like Monroe Freeling is really nimble around the rim, Joe Wadding's out there dropping NBA range threes. If you haven't seen his basketball film, you got to watch it. Now, if you've also seen a picture of his dad's a big guy. So and Joe looks young.
Yes, he does.
He just turned 17. We thought he had just turned 16, but we got that corrected. He just turned 17. He looks like a baby. So honestly, for me, I'm good with either kid, Ryan. I'm really fine with either direction they want to go. I think they're both talented kids. They're different type of kids, as you broke down. But Joe Wadding is not your typical, 3-star kid. I don't put a lot of stock in that. He's undersized, but it reminds me a lot of Ashton Craig from last year, even more. But he's even more athletic. I would say even significantly more athletic than what Ashton Craig was last year, and comes with some really good pop. I don't know if he has the frame that Ashton Craig had, but because I always thought Ashton Craig was kind of long enough to play right tackle if you need him to. Joe's a pure interior player, and so there's that. That's the only knock I have, because I'm not a huge fan of taking a bunch of pure interior guys, and I think that he is that, but he's a really athletic kid and a really skilled kid. In his basketball film, and he's like driving to the hoop and like hitting popping stops and stuff. I mean, he's leading fast. He's a really good basketball player. And he may need to be the new point guard on the intramural basketball team, since the guy they had hoped would be the point guard is, trending in another direction. But there's a chance this offensive line class could have a really nice intramural basketball team. Trade if they can get Charles Jagasaw, they could trade him for Devin Houston, in basketball season, since Devin Houston plays basketball and Charles is more of a wrestler.
Yeah,
but he's a really skilled basketball player. But I just had to get that out to you, that his mom wanted you to know that he actually scored over 16 points a game this year.
I appreciate that, because I did watch his basketball highlights and I was like, wait, really, only 8 points a game? That's a little weird. But
did they literally show every shot he made?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, but to the question, to illustrate that, I think if you obviously you have Sullivan Absher in the class. If you get Monroe Freeling and Charles Jagasaw, obviously, and you're content and you think that both Jagasaw and Absher can both be tackles long-term potentially, or at least one of them can, then I'm completely good with Otting being that fifth offensive lineman, because I think that he has upside as a center. I think that he can be a really good player in that regard, because you mentioned the athleticism. That kid getting up to the second level is like a freight train, right? Like, he has incredible short area quickness for an offensive lineman. So in that instance, I would be completely fine with it. If you only get one of Jagasaw and Freeling, though, I kind of like Page just because of the tackle upside there, right? Like, just kind of getting the insurance at tackle, because I agree with you. Usually, if it's a tackle versus interior player and they're similarly graded to me, I'm always going to defer to the tackle, the guy that I know can play outside a little bit. So I'd probably go Page, but if you get Absher and Jagasaw to the Jagasaw and Freeling in the class, then I'm completely okay with going at Joe Otting, because I think his upside is tremendous. Like, this kid, like you said, he's not a 3-star player. He's absolutely not.
James Lawrence Zensi, and I believe he's asking about Otting here, but he says, why isn't Otting in the top 1,000 players on 247? I feel funny taking it such a low-ranked prospect at a position where we take highly ranked kids. I want to say one thing, okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to say this in a disrespectful manner, so please don't take it that way. And the thing I would say is, you have to ask yourself one question before we can even address the other. Who do you trust more to evaluate Joe Otting as a player? The people that work at 24/7 Sports or Harry Heastan? Look, this is not a kid that was really on the board. I know he visited in the fall, but he was not on the board. This was more of a Harry watched the film. He went out and met the kid face to face and said, I like that kid. And they're not just offering him, they're recruiting him. He's going to be on campus in June, Ryan, and we have it on our board. He's going to be working out at the lineman camp. So if we hear that Notre Dame is still pushing for him after the lineman camp, he's going to be working with Zach Martin, Nick Martin, Liam Eichenberg, Robert Hainsey, Aaron Banks, all those guys are going to be there for that. Then it tells you that there's something there. But with all due respect, I don't really trust. You guys know my stance on that. So if you're thinking of, gee, why is Notre Dame recruiting this kid who's got not even the top 1,000, then you should probably be questioning, how could you not have an offensive lineman that's being recruited by Notre Dame in your top 1,000, that should be your question, not the other way around, with all due respect. And again, I'm not trying to take a shot at you. I just think it's just one of those things where they're going to look at, there's kids that they'll look at and just, they'll see the measurables, 6'4", 265, whatever. But again, when Iowa and Notre Dame are both pushing hard for an offensive lineman in the Midwest, chances are he's really good. And, those are, I guess that's probably even a better question, Ryan. Who do you trust more, the people at 24/7 Sports or Harry Hiestand and Kirk Ferentz when it comes to offensive line evaluations? It's a no-brainer.
With those track records, it shouldn't be too much of a question, right?
Right.
Honestly, not to bag on 247 Sports, because sometimes kids just fall through the cracks, right? Like he doesn't come from a massive school that plays this great competition necessarily in the Midwest, but you turn on the film and you're just like, that kid moves differently than everybody else on the. He is probably their most athletic player on offense, and he plays offensive line for them. So I think that he just might be a misevaluation or just a missed player. I honestly, and I'm not trying to call anybody lazy in this process, but sometimes, like you just said, Brian, they see 6'4", 265 and they just keep moving, like they don't take the time to properly.
Or they'll look at an offer list and be like, no big schools are looking at him, so we'll just pop it. Look, with all due respect, I know that happens. I can't say that it definitely happens at 247 because I never worked there, but I did work at a place where there were people that's like, well, hey, I watched this kid once, or I watched this, and then they just throw a ranking on him. And I know sometimes, and I've seen 247 people admit this, remember there was a period where they were like going through where they were kids were making up fake accounts, fake names and stuff, and they were getting like 3-star grades because they were just looking at the offer list and then the measurables and just throwing a 3-star out, and then we'll go back and go around and look at them later. So I think part of it too is that there's a little bit of that as well. But the other thing too is 247, these guys aren't just sitting around watching film all day. They have stories to write and kids to call and camps to, so it's not like they've just got this staff dedicated towards sitting down, watching film and putting out rankings either. And so in fairness to them, they're not always maybe like, if I was running an organization like that, I would have a team of people dedicated to where their number one priority was breaking down film. Or I would involve people that are part of that process. And I think that would be the best way to do it. Not recruiting analysts and people that are running sites all the time, unless there were people that you knew were film guys, which is why SI All-American has us as part of that process, because it's not that we're just publishers, but we're publishers. I'm a publisher that has a coaching background and a film background, and obviously Ryan will be a part of that process this year too. So I would definitely lean towards that. But I also understand it. I understand, why does Notre Dame have to take a 6'4", 265-pound kid? That's a good question. That would be more of a fair question, Ryan, is why are they taking an undersized guy? Why are they taking – because clearly they like him. And I think that they feel that there's a need for a guy that could maybe be a center down the road. And, with some question marks about Joey Tanona's future and, some other things. And you say, okay, well, there's still a need for a center, and maybe this is the kid that they view as being that guy. So they clearly like him, but I also think that there's still a little bit of an evaluation left with him, Ryan, and I think that's where that June camp, that's why I think he's coming up for that camp instead of taking an official the following weekend. It's because I do think they still want to see him in person, moving in person, working out, see the punch. How does he strike a bag? Those kind of things. There's still an evaluation left for Notre Dame. This isn't like they just called up Samson Oklahoma and said, hey, man, we're passing on you now because we have Joe Otting on our board. It's not that. It's not that.
No. He's a good football player, and like you said, he's been identified by a guy that you give every right to, you're going to sit back and you're just going to let it play out for a second because you're not going to question Harry Hiestand's evaluation of the offensive line. And let's see how it plays out. Maybe he's not a fit long term. Maybe he doesn't end up in the class, but if he's been identified, it's been for a reason.
Right. Got a couple Richard Young questions that we will end on those. Number one is, would you be surprised if Richard Young, from Kendrick Heath, would you be surprised if Richard Young picked Notre Dame?
Yes. Yeah. When we did our confidence meter on Friday, I think I said a 2 or 3, right? That he ends up at Notre Dame. So, And it's only a 2 or 3 because he set up the visit. Before that, I would have said 0. So, it's
before that, I didn't even know they were really had a shot at
talking
him.
to him. Yeah.
2 weeks ago. I would have been like, I mean, they're probably talking to him because that's what you do. You talk to 5-star players, but I'm shout at that kid because he came out with a top 7 and they weren't even top 7. It's not even like he had a top 3 and they expanded it to 5 and we didn't know they were in the top 5 because he only listed the top 3 and he's taking all 5 officials. He put out a top 7 and Notre Dame was nowhere to be, a part of that. So
Right.
it just shows what the staff can do. But yes, I'd be very surprised if he picked Notre Dame. Very surprised. But as I said last week, Ryan, when you get a kid on campus for an official visit, you've got a puncher's chance because they just went from top 15 for that kid to top 5, and you've got a puncher's chance. But before the visit, I'm not going to have a lot of confidence. Now, am I open to having my opinion changed if we get feedback that the visit got knocked out of the park? Sure. But before that, I can't say that a 5-star kid that's been to Bama and Georgia as many times as he's been and is being recruited by those 2 schools at running back, I can't feel confident that Notre Dame is going to get him, especially since he hasn't visited campus yet. But I just think to me, I just take it as, but what does it say about Dylan McCullough and Chad Bowden and Marcus Freeman and those guys, they can get a kid like this to even commit to visiting officially? It says a lot. It says a lot. Last one from Gavin Harden. Hypothetically, if Notre Dame were to land Richard Young, do you think it impacts their chances with a player like Jarrett Gibson or Stacy Gage in 2024?
It definitely impacts the numbers, right? Because then you're going, 3 straight years of, assuming that they're going to take at least 2 backs in this class, maybe 3 with an athlete kind of designation to it. So it's going to affect the numbers. Does it affect just one of them? Right now, I wouldn't even give him much of a chance with Stacy Gage, to be honest with you. Like, I don't think that he's even really in the conversation. So I think it affects
Jarrett Gibson.
Yeah, same thing with Jarrett Gibson. But I think that you're talking about kids more like the Corey Smiths of the world, the Nathaniel Palmers, like those types of players are who Notre Dame is pushing for.
Gauze is another guy. Nathaniel Palmer is going to be visiting this summer.
Exactly. Yeah. And they reciprocate that interest, right? So obviously they have some interest in Notre Dame. They've, are setting up visits or have been on campus already if you're Corey Smith. So yeah, I think that hypothetically, it doesn't affect just one person in next year's class. The question is what are the numbers for the running backs next cycle? That's the biggest question.
Right. Because honestly, because a guy like Jarrett Gibson or Stacy Gage, when you look at the schools that they're looking at places that are going to sign backs or have in the last couple of years that are similar to Richard Young. That's the thing about running backs is running backs are a unique breed in that you don't often see running backs shy away from going places with those other top running backs. You got to be a really confident guy to be a great running back because, number one, you got to be a physical guy. And if you're afraid of competition, you're probably someone who also isn't a super physical guy, or you know what I mean? Like, it just kind of seems like to have the mindset that I'm going to put my helmet, my face into your face and run you over. You got to be wired different. Like I as a quarterback and even a receiver, I was always looking to make somebody miss. I wanted to make him miss. I didn't want to take that hit. But you watch Richard Young play and you're like, and you watch even Stacy Gage and Jarrett Gibson play, you're like, yeah, these are tough kids. And that's why you see Georgia have like literally has like 4 or 5 5-star running backs on their roster last year. And you're like, why these kids? Number one, because they know, okay, maybe I have to wait my time, but I'm still going to get my chance and become a high draft pick, right? But the other thing is elite players are often not afraid of competition, which is why Bama signs a big-time player every day or every year. It's why Georgia signs a big-time running back every year. That's just kind of how it goes. And so, yeah, I don't think landing Richard Young would shy them away from coming to Notre Dame. I think they were shied away from coming to Notre Dame long before Notre Dame had an official visit from Richard Young. So, we'll kind of see how that plays out. But anyway, so that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. Thank you all so very much for being with us. For those of you willing to be patient as we work through the wire problems, we will get that corrected, obviously. And if you don't have the patience to deal with it, I'm sure there's other channels with not as good content, but better mics that you can run to. We will continue to put out the best content, and that will always be the focus of our shows. So for Ryan, I'm Brian. sign up for the message boards, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And thanks for all the excitement that you all are showing about the moves that we're making. We're very, very excited about that. We're going to continue to grow and improve our content and all those type of things, and keep rocking and rolling and making Irish Breakdown the best place that you can find. So for Ryan and Brian, thank you all so much for joining the Irish Breakdown podcast.